Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along. Inspire and be inspired. It's been a few weeks since we've been here. Thank you for joining us. I can see from the amount of likes and notifications I'm getting that there's quite a few of you on board already. So good afternoon. Thanks for being here. If it's the first time you're joining, a very brief introduction. My name is Andy Ward. I am coming to you live and direct from my house here on the Costa Blanca. And when we had the momentum, every week I talk to friends and well-known people in the music industry as well as the world of business, and we discuss their story. We have motivational conversations, and we have the occasional life hacks as well. Today we have a gentleman who I've known for some time and is quite possibly credited as being one of the most famous people in the house music scene, the rave music scene at one point in time. But there is a lot more to Mr. Mark Archer than being the man behind the mask, and we're going to find out all about that now. I've got lots of notifications and pings going off in my ears. If you are commenting, if you are liking, then please feel free to do so, because those will come up in front of me and I will be able to say hello to you. We actually get many more people watching the recordings than we do join us live, so I'll thank you for coming back and checking this out. And even if you're watching the recording, you can leave a comment for Mark and let him know some of his favourite moments down the years. I like to make this as interactive as I can, so Mark won't mind me just taking a few moments to say hello to a few of you who have taken time to comment. I can see Mr. Mark Astley says, "What a legend." Catriona Hutchinson sends some hearts. Aaron Hadzik, forgive me if I'm slaughtering that surname. Thank you for being here. He says, "Good evening, Mark and Andy. Looking forward to this all day." My good friend Gary Langford says, "Good evening." Ralph in Germany says, "Morning." And Paul Foster also says, "Good evening." And my good friend Mr. Dave Furs says, "Hello." Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I will bring my guest on to the stream and say welcome along, Mr. Mark Archer. How are you, buddy? You okay?
I'm good, thank you.
A great turnout for you, man. Your reputation precedes you. I am very happy. And just to bore people for 20 seconds, tonight I am only broadcasting on the Inspire and Be Inspired page. Usually I do Restream, which allows me to broadcast to various platforms. That seems to kind of throttle the visibility. And just by broadcasting on the one page tonight, we're getting a hell of a lot more visibility and interaction. Or as I say, Mark, that might just be down to the superstar that you are.
I wish.
Okay, so where to begin? You're aware of what this is about. It's a couple of gentlemen drinking a beer in a pub and discussing the good old days, except neither of us have got beers.
Yeah.
I would love to sit here with a glass of wine, but it always clouds the memory, and the tongue gets a little carried away. So we'll start off a little bit more about yourself. Tell us the year that you were born.
1968.
Okay, so 1968. Many interviews that I've conducted down the months have all been amongst people of pretty much the same age group. So much of the backdrop to our histories is the same, and yet every story is unique. So 1968, born and bred in Stafford?
Well, it was in Staffordshire, wasn't even a village, it was that small. It was a hamlet near Wolverhampton.
Okay.
Called Bishop's Wood. It's like where they do they used to do the V Festival at Western Hall. It's literally a stone's throw from there.
Okay.
But my parents, my dad was from Penn in Wolverhampton, and my mum was from Wensfield. So most of the family are from around the West Midlands.
Right, I get you. Sorry, I'm just clicking a few windows here so I can read more of these comments because they're coming through thick and fast. And only child, brothers and sisters?
Now I've got an older brother. Um, I mean, we were like when we were little, very much like twins. You know, people had often mistake us for twins, even though I was a lot smaller than him. But he you know he's into completely different kind of stuff than me. You know, did totally different music. He joined the RAF when he was about 18. Um,
Okay.
you know, and
So
I went
what?
into the
Sorry.
music.
What's the age difference between you?
He's 2 years older than me.
Okay. Right. Okay. So did he have a big influence on you musically? Socially is not the word I'm looking for. You know.
Yeah. I mean, his music taste. He was into like Jean-Michel Jarre and
Okay.
stuff like that. I mean, he was the person who introduced me to Kraftwerk, but at the time, I didn't get the link between Kraftwerk and the music that I was into.
Hmm.
Even though Numbers is the direct influence to Planet Rock, which was like a big tune for
Hmm.
me, I didn't get it then. Obviously, when now I listen.
I don't think
After
many
it.
people would have, if they're honest. You know, in
Yeah,
hindsight, it's
yeah,
okay to join the dots, very tenuous links. But back then, not many people of our age, especially, you've just a few months, couple of years on myself, but as I say, very much of the same era. So your earliest memories of music, the music scene. You say a small hamlet. So what did you have? Barn dances, school discos.
honestly, most of the places I've lived in, there's been absolutely nothing at all. I mean, we moved from there when I was 10 and moved to another small village just outside of Stafford. So it was only like school discos and things like that. But up to that point, I was into just music that I liked. The radio was always on.
Hmm.
Um, but when we moved, it was you like heavy metal or you're going to get beaten up.
Okay.
So strangely enough, I liked heavy metal for a bit, um,
Wow.
and then moved on. Like it was strange. Like the year at school we're into heavy metal that I was in. The year below we're into like the new two-tone thing,
Hmm.
and I really liked that kind of stuff. But you couldn't let people in your year know, otherwise there'd be trouble. So we kind of like kept
So
that under wraps.
you had the Harrington or the Arrington. Sorry, you had the Arrington underneath the leather jacket with the denim
Yeah, 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 yeah,
waistcoat.
yeah, yeah. The big hair and did all the head banging and everything. Yeah, I mean, I bought quite a few metal records, a lot of Motorhead, Deep Purple, that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. I've still got the odd one or two, but it only tends to be the ones that have got breaks on them.
Okay, I get you. So you say that about breaks, the two tone and the ska movement. Um, would have progressed then slowly but surely, and the 80s sound with the electronic being into Jean-Michel Jarre, the influences of your brother, and then the new romantic scene coming off the back of
Mm-hmm.
that. Those sounds must have really. Do you recall those sounds making your ears prick up?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I look back at it, like the late '70s, the tunes that I really liked was stuff like by Chic,
Hmm.
but didn't realize that until like a lot later. I went through like the heavy metal thing and the two-tone thing, and then got into like Tears for Fears, their first album, The Hurting, and like a lot of the early electronic stuff, and then obviously the electro hit the shores, and that was it for me. I
Hmm.
just followed it through.
So we hear these stories so many times, but it's always interesting to get different perspectives. Take us back and try and paint the picture of what it was that you, if you can, recall of how it took your feet from underneath you, because it was the same for all of us.
Well, there was a lad at school, and it's quite a weird story because where I was born, the little hamlet Bishopswood, went to school. You knew everyone in your class. The class sizes were really really small. And there was a lad there called Sean Lester. And a few years before we left the village, he just moved away. You know, no one knew where he'd gone. And then we moved when I was 10 and started a new school. And it was, even though it was like a bike ride away, it seemed like a million miles away from where I used to live. Go to this new school and there's Sean Lester. Like, he just appeared and went through middle school and then moved on to high school. And one day he came in and he got his sports bag and he got like all these names written all over them. And we were like, what's that? Is it like goth or something? He's like, no, it's electro. And it got like B-Boys, Shannon, Two Sisters, all the artists off like the early electro albums. And he bought the cassettes in. And there was literally 3 people in our year that liked electro, and everyone thought we were weird. And I'd not got any of the albums, you know, I didn't know anything about them. It was hearing them from Sean and this other lad, Andrew Hume, and they used to bring the cassettes in, and listening to them, and it just, you know, where have I been? Why am I missing this? And they got like
at the front of the town hall on your knees, head banging. That's where you'd be.
yeah. Thumbs in my jean loops, listening to Status Quo. Yeah. Oh dear.
Oh, great days. Takes me right back to my school discos. The headbangers used to get their little 20 minutes at the front, all going crazy, and then it's all right now. Get the Depeche Mode on. Or the Poor Hardcastle or something like that.
Yeah.
So, any music instruments up at this point that you dabbled with?
I mean, that was probably just before I really started producing. So it would have been about 86, 87. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like a conscious, I want to make music. I wanted to actually find out how they did things on these electro records. Okay. There was a track on Electro 3 called We Come to Rock by the Imperial Brothers. And it got a cough, but it kind of played a tune with this cough in the track. And I always wondered, you know, how do they do this? And I saw it was in the Dixon's window, there was a Casio SK1 sampling keyboard. And you got like a sample button on it, and you held it next to the speaker, press sample, and it record the sound. And on the record, it had the cough right at the end. So I did it, and it played a tune up and down. And that was it. That satisfied my curiosity on how, you know, now I'd worked out how they did it. So then I went on to sampling single bass notes, you know, like stab samples and things like that, and trying to copy the patterns and work out how they did stuff.
Wow. Okay, so as I did say at the top, I do try and make this as interactive as I can. Everyone watching, thank you. Please do feel free to comment. I won't interrupt Mark while he's talking. He'll come back and answer any questions, like Dave asked what school you went to in Stafford. We'll answer that at some point. Dave Wilcox comes in. He's busting a Formation. I think that looks like a Formation Records logo on his profile picture, and he says, "My hero." Are you talking about me? Or are you talking about Mark?
Obviously.
No, he's talking about you, obviously. All right, so you said 86. By this time, you would have already left school. How are you earning your money?
I'd started at a YTS scheme because I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I was pretty crap at school, to be honest. No idea what I wanted to do, but my dad was a decorator, and he became an instructor on the YTS scheme. So they taught you like bricklaying, woodwork, metalwork, and decorating. Mm-hmm. So I joined that YTS scheme, and you did like a work placement, and I got a placement. First, I got a placement at a trophy engraving shop where it was like the little sports trophies, and you engrave the names on the plaques and stuff. But I don't think I did too well there, because I was supposed to unload all the boxes, then flatten down the cardboard and burn it out the back. And I didn't unload everything and burnt loads of his stock. So I didn't stay there long, and got a placement at a decorating firm in Stafford, and I was there for like 2 years. But work tends to dry up, certain periods during the year, and because it was like a last in first out kind of thing, so I got laid off from that, and bumped into a guy who, from the breakdance days, I met in Stafford, and he asked, how I was doing, and I said I've got like this little sampling keyboard, and I was messing about with it, and he'd got a set of decks. I said, why don't you bring it round? We'll like do some little like jam sessions. So he'd like cut between two drum tracks, and I'd play like primitive bass lines over the top. We'd record it onto a cassette, then play that cassette back through his mixer, and I'd play more samples. He'd do some scratching, and we did like this really
very primitive.
Yeah, incredibly primitive. But at that time, a studio had just opened in Stafford, and it was in like the local newspaper. And we decided to take this cassette along with us to the studio. No idea what was going to happen, and we got signed up there and then.
Amazing, incredible. And you say you got signed up under what premise? So at this time, if you paint the picture of what was going on, what was the scene like? What was the hot scene at the moment then?
Well, it was 88, but it was like before, like that acid house thing had kind of hit the charts. There was a lot of the, like Bomb the Bass, Mars, Pump Up the Volume, stuff like that. And the guy who ran the studio, he obviously saw some young lads come in. We were wearing, the MA1 jackets with the VW badges pinched from someone's car, and we bought this cassette in, and he had an engineer at the studio, and probably thought, I can get these guys to front a bit of a project. So we went in there wanting to do acid house. He was like, no. What you need to do is do this, and tried to get us to do like Bomb the Bass, kind of like hip hop influenced house tempo stuff with loads of scratching on.
Okay, I get you. So you say we. Do you want to elaborate on who we were?
Well, it was originally myself, Dean Meredith, and a guy called Gareth, and we call ourselves RhythmoD. And after the first time we were in the studio, Gareth didn't like the way it was going, and he instantly like left. So it was myself and Dean.
What was it that he didn't like about it?
It was just, we went in wanting to do like a specific kind of thing, and we got, no, you're not, you need to be doing this. And he just wanted to do acid house. Right. He didn't want to do like Bomb the Bass. So he was like, no, I'm not into this. Later on, obviously, he regretted it slightly because of, what happened with the whole Altern8 Bizarre Inc. thing. But, these are the breaks you get given, don't you? And you make the choices.
And that's what separates the greats from the also rans. We've got a little conversation going on here, a little backwards and forwards between Mr. Astley and Nikki. Good evening, my love. Thank you for being here. Talking about, do you do the painting at home? And Nikki's saying, yeah, I'll make him do it. He can't get away with anything. So I'll just leave them to have that little conversation between the two of them. Fantastic. Okay, so yes, you went in there, and immediate reactions to what you were doing, success immediately.
Um,
or do you have boxes and boxes of real bad early demos?
I wish I had boxes of. I've got like almost one copy of everything that I've done. The first release I'm not proud of at all. It was, it wasn't the direction we wanted to go in, and we knew nothing about recording, production, anything like that. So it was mainly done by the engineer, who was a proficient engineer, but not into that kind of music. You really need someone who knows the style that you're trying to go for.
Hmm.
Otherwise they can't replicate it at all. They can't get close.
So
They
just
don't know the sound.
for the ignorant, forgive me for cutting you off. For the ignorant, is it the balance of the sounds, or actually finding the sounds? What would you say you need them to be in tune with?
We had difficulty explaining what we wanted,
Okay.
um, and I think then new equipment was coming out, which he maybe not have been totally au fait with. So we wanted to loop break beats, and it got to the point where we were like hand triggering them down to 2-inch tape, because I don't know whether he didn't know how to sample a break. It
Hmm.
was all the sampling was individual like drum sounds and things like that, which weren't the right sounds. There weren't the right effects. It was a catalogue of loads of different things,
Hmm.
and we just weren't happy with that first release. But we managed to start gaining experience on how to do things ourselves in a really uh, bad fashion. We were learning snippets, but not the whole of it. So there was a period of time where we didn't know how to use. It's a bit geeky. There was a code that used to be ran down to tape, so that when the tape played back, it'd sync everything up. So as you
Hmm.
recorded, everything was in time. We
The
didn't know
ASCII
how to do that bit.
the ASCII code.
Yes, so we had we'd run like a drum track down on one channel, and then when we went to record again, we'd start recording and then press start on the Atari and use the arrow keys to keep it in time. So when we finally did an acid house album, there's bits where things start to slightly drift. Not terribly, but when you can hear it,
Yeah.
and it just annoys you. But it was a learning process. I don't think, like, starting in '88, I don't think it was till about like 95, 96 when I actually did something that was how I really wanted it.
Hmm.
That, like,
You'd finally honed your skills, and
yeah,
you'd
yeah,
learnt
like
everything.
the Nexus 21 material. I finally made a tune that was not all samples
Hmm.
trying to replicate a Detroit thing. I'd learned how to do it.
Well, what I've discovered from many different conversations, that it's very easy to forget just how fast things moved in that time period between 88 to 90, 91. I've quite what's the word I'm looking for? I've been quite open in admitting that my memory was very jumbled of the sounds that were coming out, the clubs that we were going to in 88 and
Mm.
89. I was thinking that we were well ahead of ourselves, and you forget that how it goes on. So when you go back to those days, things, and it's stating the complete obvious, because we're all going to remember, you didn't have the immediate plethora of information that we've got at your fingertips now. So
Yeah.
it was a really painful learning curve, wasn't it? And
Oh, totally.
that's where there are so many. Um, I would assume so many different inspirations and copycat ideas in so many different, because people say, oh, that's exactly what I want to do, and then they'll do it, but it'll just be a carbon copy of something else.
Yeah, but he was also, I think, because people were exploring the equipment that they had, and you'd hear something and didn't know how they'd done it. You try and replicate it, do it like a completely different way, and maybe like invent something else. So it was, that's why the music was, going so fast, because people were like constantly learning new tricks, new ways, like that, like when the time stretching thing came out, people didn't know how to do that, and all of a sudden everyone's like on the time stretching thing, and it was just like moving so fast.
Can you recall who you would say? I mean, I said jokingly before we went live, I'm grateful for you giving me your time, because you must have been interviewed a million times. But have you ever said before, or does it come to you, who your biggest influences were back then, who you can immediately say that, you always knew that these were the people who you were looking towards?
I think the obvious ones were the Belleville Three with
Okay.
Kevin Saunson, Derek May, and Juan Atkins. I was bought a box set which is up there somewhere for my 21st birthday, and it was after I'd done like the RhythmoD thing. We did like acid house albums and stuff like that. We did like break beats and samples albums, and we'd done the first Bizarre Inc. album, which was kind of edging towards techno, but with a very like Larry Heard kind of influence to it.
Okay, well, I need to roll you back there then. So, Bizarre Inc. So,
Yeah.
tell us how this came about, because you're saying things like this in the back of my mind. I'm thinking Bizarre Inc. Obviously, I know Bizarre Inc. But so, what was your involvement there then? You didn't
Well,
start Bizarre Inc.
yeah. Bizarre Inc. was me and Dean. So
That's
we did
crazy.
Rhythm OD.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. We did the Rhythm OD thing. Then we were allowed to do an acid house album. Um,
I'm
and we made it
astounded.
look.
I'm totally astounded. I'm so sorry. Carry on.
But it's one of those things. It's like with the slow motion thing. So many people are like, oh no way, never realised it was you. It's unless you read, the writers' names and the credits and stuff on records, it's just an artist title, and that's that.
Yeah,
No,
but I
no
would
one.
I would have thought that's something I would have known. That's crazy. So, Bizarre Inc. Then tell us
Yeah.
about how that began.
So we were doing the hip hop and the acid, and we wanted to do something with a more of a like a Larry Heard washing machine, almost techno kind of edge. And a word that was always bandied around was bizarre. It's like, oh no way, that's dead bizarre. So like, there was like Soft House Incorporated, and there was always those company at the end of stuff. So like Bizarre Inc.
Hmm.
So me and Dean did the first album, Technological. Then took one track off that for the first 12, which was Technological, but on the B side of it, it was like a hip house tune called "It's Time to Get Funky,"
Okay.
um, and that was like a bit of a. It sampled like old jazz funk and stuff, and had housey piano, and Graham Park and Alistair Whitehead used to play it at the Cool Cat in Nottingham, but we never realised any of our records were selling at all.
Okay.
Um, but it got to a point where I'd been working with Dean, for like over a year, and he wanted to go solo. Um, Unfortunately, rather than just say, "Look, I wouldn't mind doing tunes on my own," he managed to get me the sack from the recording studio that I was at.
Right.
Um, so me and him were like employed as engineers there. So I spent a few months on the Dole, pondering, is that it? My recording career over? Um, and the way they got it that I was going to leave was I was nicking discs from the studio. So the studio manager really didn't want me anywhere near the building at all. He just told me, drop the keys back, don't want you back here. But I plucked up courage a couple of months later, phoned him up and said, I really want to do a techno album. After hearing the box set, which had got like Derek May tunes on there, Kevin Sorensen, Juan Atkins, and that really like, this is what I want to do. So I took the box set into the studio, all the techno records that I could find. Like there's the Virgin compilation on 10 records, Detroit, the new dance sound. Sampled as many drum loops as I could, individual bass noises, and that's pretty much how Nexus21 was born.
Right. So I've listened to everything you've just said. I'm still quite embarrassed the fact that I forgot about the whole Bizarre Inc. thing. Okay, so I'm over that now. I'm the worst interviewer ever. I'll put my hand up. Zero research. I like this to be as natural as it can. Okay, so you mentioned about the album. Eventually, would it be sometime after that you'd meet up with Neil?
Well, we recorded the Nexus21 album on Blue Chip.
Right.
Did the first single, Still Life Keeps Moving. So this was around the summer of '89. And because of the whole, me getting the sack from the studio, I'd stopped, like all through '88 and early '89. Was hanging around with Dean and a certain group of friends, but I'd started going to different clubs with my then girlfriend and some other mates. It was like a kind of totally separate thing. And Blue Chip Studios, there wasn't really a need for a recording studio in Stafford. There was no music scene, so he wasn't getting enough people through the door to pay for the rent and the hire purchase on all the gear. So towards the end of '89, the studio closed. So again, I thought that's it, my recording career over. But I'd started going to, it was like a small wine bar in Burntwood called Number Sevens. And I'd always tell, wherever I used to go to a club, I'd take a copy of Still Life with me, just in case the DJ hadn't got a copy. And I took a copy there up to the DJ, who was Neil Macy. And I went to hand it to him, and he went through his box and pulled it out, and he'd already got a copy, which is like, oh my God, someone's bought a copy of one of my records, It's
blew your mind.
And I over the weeks, got talking to Neil, and he explained that the guys who were running Cool Cat Records out of Birmingham were setting up a new label, and they'd asked him to join the company as like A&R, because he had his finger on what was going on. And then one week I went up to talk to Neil, and he said, "Oh, the boss is over there by the bar. Go and have a word with him." And I'm a very shy person. Can't, it's going up to someone I don't know is very difficult. Mm-hmm. So I went over to the bar and stood there and watched him have a conversation with who I later learned was Pat Ward. And they're having a conversation. And they obviously knew someone was standing there. And they stopped talking. I was like, "I'm really sorry to bother you. I'm Mark from Nexus21. And he's like, "Oh, we've got your album in our office. I was going to try and find how to get in touch with you. We'd like to sign you." And Blue Chip had just like stopped. So it's like, from one thing stopping, this was like possibly, signing to a brand new label. Said, why don't we come to Birmingham for a meeting?
Let me just interject here. The amusing thing whatever the word is how unassuming that little venue was,
Yeah.
pretty much in the middle of nowhere, really. A tiny little venue that was quite well known, but the significance of that evening is immense.
Mm.
And so it blows my mind, really. And Neil Macy is a legend. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
him to have a chat with him because he's very instrumental in a lot of things Birmingham related. So the divine timing, the gods were on your side.
Yeah. And it's just like the studio in Stafford opening when we'd done that cassette. All the way through my early career, it's just extremely happy accidents.
Hmm.
You know, like bumping into Neil Rushton, you know, him actually having the album and wanting to get in touch. Um, had a meeting and he played us Rhythmatic, Neil Howard Indulge, Symbols and Instruments Moods. And it's just like hearing that stuff and be like, where do I sign?
Yeah.
You know, and after being signed to Blue Chip, where we didn't see a penny for any of the music that we did, we later found out that we were doing it for studio time, which
Okay.
was, okay. Um, Network straight away offered you a recording advance. We was like, well, we actually get money for this. This is incredible. So ploughed it straight back in and bought a sampler, which like a Akai S950. It's like my first proper piece of equipment.
Hmm. So this is the back end of 89 into
Yeah,
90. Okay, and still based in Stafford at this point.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
In Nosal. So on a lot of the records, it says recorded at Last Song Studios, which is Nosal spelt backwards. And it was basically just my bedroom at my mum and dad's cottage.
Brilliant. Some of the things that used to go on, then the pseudonyms and so on and
Yeah,
so forth. Which, I mean, you've trumped it all, which we'll get into eventually. Just very briefly, sending a shout out to Mr. Blackwax. Mr. Astley still commenting. You'll be able to read these back. Good evening, Emily. Someone not too far from yourself. She says loved Cameron Dante back in the day. Paul Bradley says oi, as does Mark Ricketts, also tagging Victor Broom. And Rubes says, I loved Biorhythms 3. So, and then Paul Bradley says, if I had to do an interview with my record collection behind me, I'd have to lie on the floor. Wow, it's all about quality, not quantity. Looks like we're having a vinyl off here. Okay, so I'm keen to say always, in these conversations, we're not going to cover the every aspect of the journey, and a lot of this has been documented. Tell us if you can, if whenever you've spoken to people and you think, what, I've never really covered this part, or there's something that happened there that I never get the opportunity to talk about. Any key moments back then that you can think of that were, in hindsight, when you piece it back together, you say about happy accidents, or the way things progressed, how things could have possibly been different if you'd have made a different decision at any time.
I mean, generally with life, you never want to change anything because you wouldn't be where you are. One breath different, and things could be totally different. I mean, if being brutally honest, if I could still be here now, where I am with Nicky and all the rest, but I've gone through the whole Nexus21 and Altern8 thing, working with somebody different, then I would have done.
So I guess I have to ask them, because I'm aware of friction back then, and issues. I'm not sure how raw that is, or how in detail you've ever spoken about that. So I'll allow you to tell what part of that you want to tell.
Um, before I was booted out of Bizarre Inc. Myself and Dean, you know, we weren't keyboard players. We were the kind of guys who take a bunch of records into a studio and be like, I like that bit, I like that bit, I like that bit. So the guy at the studio put out an advert for, you know, people who could operate computers and were also keyboard players, programmers. And the advert was answered by Chris and Andy Meacham, who later joined Dean to become Bizarre Inc. So after I was booted out, and there was the period of me being on the dole, when I went back to the studio manager said, well, you'll need to work with Chris because you can't play keyboards. So we were kind of put together, even though he wasn't, you know, like a friend of mine. So, you know, working with someone who'd been a part of getting you the boot was a bit difficult, but, you know, you could play music to him and say, like, I like that. Could you play something similar to that? Maybe instead of going down at the end, go up at the end, such and such. And he'd fire like a load of riffs, and then you'd eventually like land on something, yeah, that, and then record it. Because he wasn't into like house or techno or anything. He was into Depeche Mode and stuff like that. But it's similar with like, you know, relationships where you'll meet someone, you'll have like a shared interest. But when it got to the point where we were constantly doing gigs together, you know, staying in hotels together and stuff, it kind of got a bit strained. And the relationship, you know, I'd tend to, we'd go to gigs to do live PAs. I'd go out the front to dance. He'd stay in the dressing room. As soon as we'd finish, he'd go. And, you know, there was a lot of musical differences. And I had a clear vision of where I wanted to go with things. And because he wasn't into the music, a lot of the things that he put forward weren't necessarily right for the project. And there was always a battle, you know, if you're, because I did a lot of extra tunes on my own that ended up as B-sides and things like that. And he's like, if you're going to have that on the record, then I want this on the record. And it's, you know, it doesn't fit. So the relationship after, you know, the few years that we were working together became very strained. And I was just churning tunes out, you know, the DJ Next stuff that I was doing. I was doing a lot of stuff that turned into Altern8 tunes, like, you know, Frequency, Armageddon, Reindulge, all tunes that I did myself, but they got used as Altern8 tracks. And we split everything 50-50 to save argument. Then it got to a point where I'd recorded a track under the name Zen Mantra. It was like the first, like, progressive house was the term that was used in around like late 92, early 93.
Is that the one with the baby on the cover? Has that got a baby on the cover?
That was the second Zen Mantra release. The first one was on red vinyl.
Okay.
And it was basically an ode to Golden in Stoke. So it's called the Midas CP, me trying to be clever. And it sold well. But he wanted half the money from it. And because it was nothing to do with our Nexus21 Altern8 agreement, he decided to try and sue me. So, and you know, you're not going to work with someone who wants to sue you. So that was that, and it ended, you know, very bitterly, unfortunately, which spoilt a lot of, you know, what we'd done, all the gigs, and, you know, going to Detroit together and stuff like that. So it wasn't great.
So that was within the timeline. Again, you'll have to forgive my ignorance and my lack of research. Where did that fit into the peak of, the success that you were having, and the infamous Shelleys episode, and so on?
So that, I mean, that was like around 93. So, we'd done like all the gigs together, and we did have a laugh. It wasn't like, we couldn't stand each other. There was times when if we were in each other's company too long, things would just get a bit tense. But there's so many gigs, like the Shelleys one, for instance. We did have a laugh, and obviously a lot of success together. Going on top of the pops and stuff.
Well, we had a conversation with Neil Rushton, who told us the story about the progression of the promotion, and the hype is probably the wrong word, but I think you'll agree hype as well fits well behind it all. And so then when Altern8 blew up and the scene changed, in hindsight, people have said, I'm sure you'll agree, that kind of bastardized the sound ever so slightly. And yet you yourself, such an credible musician and producer, can stand with your chest puffed up, because you've created so much credible body of work. Did that ever used to annoy you, the fact that you were seen to go down a more commercial route, if that's the right phrase? Did you ever struggle with the credibility, or have I just put that in your head now?
No. The weird thing is with the success, we did a tune, say, for instance, Infiltrate, which the reason we did Infiltrate was because the Overload EP sold well, because it was an 8-tracker. Pure value for money for DJs. You instead of buying like one import, which has got one decent track on, why not buy this UK release with 8 tracks on? You're going to get more of a set out of it. So it sold well without there being loads of promotion. And then Neil suggested, what, it's about time you did a follow-up. So it wasn't like a great concern until after, Infiltrate took off the way it did. And then you've got a kind of dilemma where the tune after it, once a tune's gone into the charts, if you do a tune that's less successful, you're then branded as a one-hit wonder, and that's it.
I know all about that. I know all about that.
You're totally swept under the carpet, and that's it. So without like making a carbon copy of something, like say like To Unlimited or Technotronic, they do like 3 releases that are all incredibly similar because they've got a certain formula. Activate was still something that we really wanted to do. I was still the samples that we used in it, the reason why we were doing it, but we were still trying to make something bigger than Infiltrate, but not by selling out or making a real cheesy tune. I think,
but it wasn't. None of the records you made were cheesy at the time. It was as the scene progressed and people moved on to other things. In hindsight, then it's always the way, isn't it? People say, that's so pastiche.
Yeah, totally. I mean, through the 2000s, we were like a dirty word. Getting slated in so many interviews. People absolutely slating us. And it got to a point where, there was a point where I was embarrassed to say that, that's what we did because of the slating we were getting. And then it seemed to kind of turn round and everyone was using us as an influence. And then it was like, okay to like Altern8. But for a while, it was horrible.
So you say did it trouble you deeply You know, honestly, or did you just brush it off? Because you've already said that you were quite shy. So did you know? Did it
Oh,
str- did it keep
during
you
the
awake at
2000s,
nights?
I had I mean, I had a hard time during the the 2000s, to be honest. Like late 90s. I mean, when I first met you in the Canal Club,
Hmm.
um, that was when, like, after the success and everything, and then I was kind of like starting again. You know, done the Altern8 thing, and then we did the slow motion thing, and then myself and Danny were running Dancer Records,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden it all kind of like when networks stopped, everything stopped.
So the problem here is knowing the depth of the story, knowing that part of the chapter. It's difficult for me to not rein you back a little bit, because that is a really
Yeah.
important part, because the output of music going from, as you say, the music that was seen to be, you know, old school, to making some of the best US house music out of the West Midlands that I heard, that I used to support and represent, and again making a conscious decision to do it under sort of like a pseudonym, so to speak.
Mm.
Tell us about that period, because not everyone is a DJ that's watching this. Not everyone is going to be even aware of slow motion.
Mm.
You know, so tell us about that little chunk, the mid 90s towards the back end of the 90s.
So with Altern8 stopping and the scene, you know, fracturing the way it did into, you know, like techno and jungle and happy hardcore and things like that, and I kind of totally got out of that scene and went to a club, and Pete Bromley, um, who I'd known for quite a few years, he was playing like, you know, Masters at Work mixes of Trailer Ends and stuff, and I was like, you know, how have I missed all this? You know, I was so deeply involved with the hardcore thing. I'd been kind of blinkered and missed loads of the early garage stuff. Um, and I was doing the Zen Mantra thing, which started off as like the kind of early UK progressive thing, but kind of edged towards like Todd Terry kind of beats by the second release that had a picture of my
That's the one with
daughter
the baby.
on.
That's the one with the baby on.
And
Yeah.
it got like that kind of UK happy bouncy influence to it. But by the third Zen Mantra release, which was the Prime Cuts EP on Dancer,
Dancer.
you know,
Yeah.
I'd gone fully like into, you know, like Masters at Work, attempted Masters at Work territory. But before I did that, I'd started working with Danny, because
This is Danny Taurus we're
Danny
talking about.
Danny Taurus. So I was doing the Zen Mantra and the DJ Next stuff on two little labels, Stafford North and Stafford South, and he did an EP for me under the name Danny Taurus. And then we started working on tracks together, and we did this tune called Piano Groove. Listen back to it, and well, you know, where were we going with that? And somebody had asked me to do like some hip hop beats for them. So I'd done this like small snippet of hip hop beats, left it in the Atari. Danny was like messing around. I heard it, said, "You can't give that away. That's too good. Why don't we build like a house tune round it? Somehow go to that in the middle and have like, you know, piano house either side." So the original idea of Piano Groove, we kind of scrapped it, but kept the formula of having like house beats with piano in. And that's where Bells of New York came from. And that was originally like the B side, because I'd already done a Zen Mantra tune, which turned into the A side, which was I Feel High. And Danny said, that's too good to be a Zen Mantra tune. That needs to be bigger. We did Bells of New York. He actually did the Dancer Records logo while he was on the bus on the way home to Stoke. Did it in pencil.
It's
Uh,
like a star. It's just a star, isn't it? Draw with like
it's
a
supposed
flash
to
at the
be
end.
the sun coming from behind the moon. So it's like that ping of light
Yeah.
behind it and then dancer across it. We were trying to be like very American. So we got a load of American imports and we thought what we'll do is get 3 different records, take a first name and a second name and off different records. And then we'll get a phone number and get the first bit of that phone number, the middle bit of that phone number, and the last bit of that phone and make it all up. What we didn't realize was it was the same phone number on each record. So we basically just rewrote someone's phone number.
Brilliant.
So when Bells of New York was like doing its thing, this bloke in America is getting loads of people. You were putting out Bells of New York, he's like, it's nothing to do with me. And he got like well peed off.
Amazing.
To the point he actually made his own tune called The Real New York Bells by Co-Motion.
Wow. No way. That's brilliant. And slow motion Bells of New York, because I know there are some of my friends watching who aren't DJs. It's as Mark explained, house beat, huge pianos, then it breaks down. Pump it up, homeboy, boy. Where is that sample from? Remind us.
The saxophone.
The horns, the sax, yeah.
It's actually a breakbeat album from Sheffield.
Okay.
And it's just like the little bits right at the end. There's just loads of noodly sax. And we were just flicking through it and you're like, that bit.
That bit. You nailed it. Absolutely
That's
incredible. Many years later, I spoke to Mr. Rushton. I said, I need to do a remix for Bells in New York. It never happened. And then the remix of that was at some point months down the line, because that was a huge Marco Polo's anthem, huge Light Bar anthem, Canal Club, Theatre Bar, all of these like massive. So anyway, I've interrupted the story you were telling me. So we're still in the mid 90s now. You're releasing a lot of the stuff on Dancer and so on.
So we started Dancer because that was supposed to be like a fake label. So we started it as like a proper label.
Mm-hmm. Where was the Frank Ainsworth connection? Was he distributing for you?
That was all going through, the custard factory.
Right. Okay, because I know Danny, Frank used to put out, someone we know, Frank used to put out a lot of music with Danny as well, or Danny used to release stuff with him anyway. Well,
Danny signed to 6x6,
mm-hmm.
but it being like the first time he kind of got into the industry, he felt that the contract was too claustrophobic for him. He wanted to do like loads of different things with different people.
Mm-hmm.
So after a few years, Danny kind of bought his way out of the contract and out of slow motion. But that kind of like coincided with, when Network and 6x6 kind of stopped,
mm-hmm.
Where I found myself, like right back at square one.
Okay. So then DJing, sorry, carry on.
I didn't have the contacts because everything I'd done since 1990 was with Network, through Network. They get me remix work. And I didn't have the confidence to send music to different people. Didn't mm-hmm. think it was worthy. So I kind of, stopped producing for a bit, and that's when I started the DJing, and warming up for Kiddo.
That's it. Well, that's where the Kiddo connection will come, because I think it would have been Kiddo that would have brought you over to the. We did a few shows on Choice. I would come and play for Kiddo quite a few times, and then the Karma project as well. Kiddo and Mark Archer, Karma. I remember that fondly. Some great tracks. Right. Okay. So throughout all of this time? I mean, at some point you started to settle down. What part of your life did you and your beautiful wife uh, connect?
This one here, because
Yes.
I've actually been I've actually been married 3 times in total.
What?
Yes,
Jeez. Okay.
third time lucky.
There you go. Third time's a charm. Is that what they say? Third time's a charm.
Yeah,
Well, I've got to
yeah.
say, I'm still to meet face to face, but she's a diamond. You got a great one there,
Oh,
mate.
oh,
She's
she is.
absolutely
She is.
amazing.
She's probably changed my life for the better. But
Beautiful. So how long has that union been together then?
well, we've been together now for 13 years this year. So like during, well, pretty much all my early career, but my then girlfriend, and then we got married, had 2 children. Around the time when I was doing the canal, um, we split up. I met somebody else, early 2000s. But it was at that point I kind of like fell out with music completely, really, because I felt, I'd tried everything from having to go back to square one and warming up for kiddo, and just when it was kind of, I was doing the warm up, and then it got to the point when he was moving to different clubs, so I was standing in for him, and playing the main slots at the canal, and then Moneypenny's moved in, and the
Hmm.
kind of the rug was
The
pulled from
rug
under
was
my
pulled from
feet,
under you.
and that was it. It was like I can't keep doing this, going back to square one again,
Hmm.
and I thought it was going to last a lot longer, but I kind of like, right, music, I'm done. I
Wow.
got a job at Argos, in a
Really?
call center. Yeah, yeah,
Wow. So let me pause the story there. We're an hour into this. I hope you're okay to carry on
yeah,
chatting for a
yeah.
little while. Thank you to everyone that's with us live. I see a few people. Austin Wallace says he grew up listening to you, and no matter how many interviews he's heard, they all had enjoyment and document an unforgettable slice of music history and an amazing scene. Thank you for your comment, Austin. Lynn Alison says such an interesting interview and an amazing chat. She's a disco and a house kid, but all mixed up in the bag. Oh, all mixed up in the big music ball. Yes, and there's a few more comments there, as I say. Mark will come back and read them all and reply at some point. Um, I obviously don't want you to be specific at all, but I do want to ask the question because some people would be interested to know. And again, I'm not looking for specifics, but you were very, very successful. There must have been a lot of money floating around for you at some point. Was it as insane as people think, or not really?
Um, I mean, it was the most money I'd ever had in my life at that point. It was a lot. But when the big success came, I was 20, 23. You don't know how to handle
I bet you bought
things.
loads of studio gear. Did you buy?
Yeah,
Tell me you
yeah,
bought a house. Tell me you bought a.
yes, yeah,
Good
yeah.
man. Good man.
But um, like when I split up with my first wife, I didn't want there to be the whole upheaval of splitting the house and her having to buy a property. I left everything there. Like
Very,
the
very
entire. I
commendable.
just
Well,
I just went with my clothes and that was it.
uh,
So I
I
can,
didn't. I didn't really
completely
mean to.
started
I
again.
didn't mean to pry that much into your
No,
private
no, no.
details. Forgive me.
It's like when I did the book. People say it's a very honest book, but there's no point doing something like that unless you're going to tell the truth.
Hmm.
So
Again,
like when I said like the 2000s are a really difficult time because loads of things that build up beforehand all come to like a peak, and you have a bad time of it, and I did through the 2000s.
I hear that. Now, again, the world's put my hands up. The world's worst interviewer. I completely forgot about the book as well. See, really, what I could have done was got the book, read the book, and then asked you questions about it. In my defense, it's a lot more honest interview. It's probably rubbish, but it's just a chat between you and I, you know.
Yeah.
So tell us. So I did actually reference the book. The title of the book I referenced earlier. It came out in. It was the beginning of the pandemic.
2016, the book came out.
Okay, see, I'm
Yeah.
4 years behind.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. I'm trying to save
Thank you,
myself, and
researcher.
I'm just digging a hole for myself. So tell us about the book.
Well, it's one of those things where if somebody had told me, like when I left school, before I did the decorating and everything, this is going to happen to you and this is going to happen to you. I never thought anyone would be interested in, what I got to say. So people kept saying, you need to do a book, you need to do a book. And so, I don't see the point, it wouldn't be a seller at all. And then Billy Daniel Bunter did his own book. And I did an interview, like a small piece for his book. He got a few different people in, and he said he had a lot of feedback about my little bit in the book. Would I like to do one myself? And because a lot of people had said, why don't you do one? But there's no way I'd have known, how to go about it. Didn't know any writers, anything like that, who would publish it, or even the confidence to, if I did get it done, to send it out anywhere. So he kind of like sorted all that side out. And a chap called Andrew Woods phoned me like every day at 10 o'clock in the morning and just asked like an open question and just let me, free fall, just go off on one about, like things we've talked about in the interview. And I do race forward, as you've noticed, and I have to be reined in. And the most difficult part of the book process was sorting the timeline out, because I'd go off on tangents left, right, and centre, and trying to make sure that it was all in the correct timeline order. But the book basically was from the minute I was born until myself and Nikki got married.
All right, brilliant. So, and it is called The Man Behind the Mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, right, because I do remember, and you did a big tour for it. I do recall that. So, yeah, again, I'll make no apologies. It is what it is. I'm useless. But I do remember. Paul Bradley says apparently someone's got it on sale on eBay for £123.
Crikey.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Andy Smith says the book is amazing and very relatable. That's Andy Smith. Malcolm Sharp, with his drum and bass number plates as his profile picture, says, I got my name in the book. Fantastic. I also, part of your story was documented in the Join the Future by Matt Annis. I've interviewed Matt on a few times, and that was a great piece on there. So then, 2016 to 2000s, and you said you had what would you put it down to? Maybe you don't know, maybe you have an idea how all of a sudden the revival came about again. Do you think it's people grew up, their responsibilities moved on, and then we could go back out again, or was it a completely different generation?
I mean, it's a strange one with the old school scene, because it kind of goes in waves. You'll have like a year where, there was a year where I practically had no gigs whatsoever, and that's when Nikki took over doing my gigs. The person who was sorting gigs out for me that year, apart from the gigs that came into my Facebook inbox, they weren't able to get me a single gig. And Nikki said, look, I haven't got any experience, but let me try. And if I do any better, then we'll carry on doing them. So it's a very difficult scene. You can have years where there's no gigs, some and then you'll have like a bumper year. But I think when like the whole old school revival thing came along, you'd get the crowd who were actually at the raves, wanting to relive it. And, maybe their younger brothers and sisters who weren't old enough to go to the raves, collected flyers and tapes and etc. They wanted to, live it firsthand. So you'd have that for quite a period. But now you've got a whole generation of people who've been brought up by their mom and dad on this music. They're at the front singing every single word, and you get, how on earth do you know this? This is older than you. But they've been literally brought up on this music, and I think that's where there's like been a bit of a resurgence of it again.
Mm-hmm. I get you. So Austin Wallace beats me to it. I was just about to say we should give credit to NLA Artists, the company that Nikki started and does well. Is she shy to jump on the screen? Does she want to come and say hello?
No. she's never done an interview or anything like this at all.
Okay,
but she's here.
We'll talk in third person then. Nikki is very, very enthusiastic about all of the gigs. She's your biggest cheerleader when you go about. She's your biggest fan. I think it's very apparent. A lot of the events, you have some very... she has some favourite events that she's always raving about that she loves. And then some of the artists on the roster putting you on the spot that she represents. Give us a little plug for NLA Artists.
Well, I mean, she started basically just to look after me. And then, within a matter of months, people like, other old school DJs were noticing I was getting bookings. And they're like, who's doing your bookings? Would they mind getting me some? And I said, well, it's Nikki. She's just sorting out my bookings because I can't shout about myself, whereas she's like the first person to start shouting about me. And now she's got, like a roster of like 30 artists. I mean, people like DJ Fast Eddie and Tyree Cooper on there. And it just, she chats to them like friends. And I'm just like total fanboy. Can't believe she's on the phone to Fast Eddie and stuff. Yeah, absolutely blows my head. But she's doing a brilliant job.
Mm-hmm. The beautiful thing about that, to see the genuine humble attitude that you have, to the heights that you have attained yourself and the talent that you have, to still be so starstruck by these guys, as you say, fanboy.
She gets embarrassed about how fanboy I do get, and I mean, and he honestly, it's with so many people, even people, I've DJed with for years. I still see them as the people that I was on the dance floor listening to when they were DJing.
Mm-hmm. And that's very endearing, because it means you're very down to earth and you've always kept your feet on the ground, for all of the trials and tribulations that you've been through, and to get through it. So here we are on the other end of a crazy few years. You mentioned, and someone else mentioned in the chat earlier, about other production partnerships that you've had. You've still not learned. You're still teaming up with other people, and but tell us about some of the success that you're currently achieving, or you have achieved in recent times.
Well, I saw a post by Simon Shadowchild.
And as we say that, here he is commenting in the comments. Respect.
The Don himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he's honestly a studio genius. And he said, how do you fancy like doing a track together? And normally I'd say, yeah, sound, agree to it, and it would never happen because it'd be totally out of my comfort zone. And this one time I thought, no, do you know what? I need to do this. I need to like go over to his studio and see what we do. And went over there, and like the first track that we did together, it was just absolutely bang on, you know, what I wanted, you know. And I came away from it, phoned Nicky straight away. I was like, oh my God, you need to listen to this. And it was just a pure raw, you know, like drum machine and 303, like acid workout. But it was, you know, it was so refreshing to work with him. You know, it's so on the same page, really easy to work with. I mean, the guy who used to do all the Altern8 stuff, the engineering, Mike Bell, when we were in the studio, you'd be listening to stuff and you'd turn to him to say, you know, this could do with, and he'd already be doing it. And Simon's exactly the same as that. It's like, I'll go to say something, he's already, you know, most of the time I can keep quiet in a studio session because it's like he knows what I'm thinking. You know, and I'll bring to the table like, oh, just do a reverse edit there. You know, there's my bit.
I hear that. I hear that. So tell us about the actual production name and some of the big tracks.
Well, we did this first EP using our initials, Mark Archer, Shadow Child. So it's under the name Mask. And that was for Super Rhythm Tracks, which is a label run by Jerome Hill. So, you know, really grateful for Jerome, like going out on a limb and putting out, like, you know, like a brand new artist. But we used our own names as well. So Shadow Child and Mark Archer present Mask, which is a bit of a mouthful, but Jerome went with it. And we did a follow-up, Return of the Mask, which is, you know, the Mark Morrison thing, a bit of a play on words. And then for the third release, we'd already sent Jerome. It was a collaboration with Fast Eddie, some more on like a hip house tip. And we'd already sent it to Jerome. And it didn't kind of fit in with the first two EPs. But Simon said, you know, why don't we release it on Food? And it's a clear vinyl release. So, you know, it's brilliant to work with not only Simon, but also Fast Eddie. And then we decided to do a follow-up to it. And the idea behind the tune was Simon had found a speech snippet from Keith Haring talking about his dad explaining Morse code.
Okay. Show us your hand. Show us your hand.
So, yeah, I've got a bit of a Keith Haring fan. You know, it's pretty much everywhere in the house. So straight away, as soon as he played that sample, he's like, you know, we've got to use that. So then the idea came, why don't we spell out Mask using Morse code, which is the actual the stab pattern in the tune is Morse code for Mask.
Okay.
But when Pet's recordings signed the track, the whole Shadow Child and Mark Archer presents Mask is a bit of a mouthful. So that came out as Shadow Child and Mark Archer. But I mean, you know, that's been getting some like really big plays, like you know, the likes of Peggy Goo, and so it's you know, I can't believe, you know, when people are playing my stuff, you know, I've still got the same excitement as I did, like when that first terrible RhythmoD tune got played in Our Price Records, you know, and I was stood in there getting embarrassed about it. It's the buzz of having a tune out, you know, and people actually playing them, you know, that's what it's about for me.
Indeed. And have you ever thought having a throwback to those glory days and actually on purpose getting the music to warp at a time and not match up every now and again?
I think if Simon actually let me do some engineering, that's what would happen. That's why I leave it to him.
Brilliant, fantastic. So, I mean, it's a beautiful, heartwarming conversation that it does go to show the journey, and clearly you've still got the energy. You know, it's far from over, and you're still keeping busy. What's the biggest thing that you immediately think of that's on the horizon for you?
Um, I honestly think it's the partnership with Simon. You know, the with that on the same page. You know, we played at Shindig Festival this year and did a back to back. You know, and it's an absolute pleasure working with him. You know, DJing or producing, and it's seeing Morse code as you know the plays and success that it's having. It was like when I did Bells of New York, you know, after having the success of Altern8, and then that stopping and thinking maybe you know this is it. I've had my 5 minutes, and then you know Bells of New York doing what it did. You know, it was nice that it was me working with somebody different, you know, and we could still have success. So this again, working with Simon and this, you know, doing what it's doing, it's really nice. So plus the fact he's just done a remix of Bells of New York, so hopefully that's coming out soon, and you know, fingers crossed that as well.
Brilliant. And then just think, sitting here whilst listening to you, putting the maths together. Next year is going to be 35 years since you've been
Yeah,
in the game. Can
yeah.
you believe that? You got anything planned? Was that
It's
a
just
sly
it's
look
just
over
because
at Nikki, like, yeah, we got something planned, but we can't talk about it?
yeah, she'll be there planning away. She's already pressing on her phone, going like mad. Yeah, no, at the moment it's you know with so many different artists coming out, so many different new styles and stuff. Just trying to keep your head above water and people remembering that you're there. You know that's I'll be happy with that. So you know, doing the tracks with Simon, it's just you know such an added bonus.
Brilliant. Well, mate, listen, I really could sit and talk to you all night, but I think we have really painted the fantastic picture of, you know, what the brilliant journey that you've had, and it's
Thank
going to
you.
continue. I'll say thank you to everyone for being here. Um, yeah, I can only apologise for my useless research. I can only apologise for my
No
useless
need, no
memory.
need.
But so we need to plug the book, The Man Behind the Mask. Who's the
Yeah.
publisher? Where they can pick that, they can find that.
It's on Music Mondays.
Okay,
At the moment, it's sold out, so I don't know whether it's going to go to paperback or not.
okay. Are you
This
planning on doing a read good audio book?
well, this is something that I'd really like to do. I mean, right from the get go with the book, everyone asked, you know, is it going to be on Kindle? Is it going to be an audio book? And it's something where it was hardback and that was it. So you know, this could be something to work on over the next year.
Hmm. Wonderful. And then if people want to find you as well and book you, NLA artists,
Yeah.
for all of the gigs, just remind us of the website for that.
Well, it's the email address is just Nikki at NLA-artist.com.
Right.
She's
Okay.
cussing me here.
She's cussing, yeah, cussing, yeah. So we're getting lots of people liking the stream. There is no way for me to end this other than just ending it and saying thank you, mate. Really, I appreciate. I'm going to stop myself. There is a way that I want to end this. It's been, if we can get through this, it's been quite a horrific time for you recently. We want to say a couple of words,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
to remember a couple of people.
yeah. I mean, you know, the um, last couple of weeks have been pretty brutal, to be honest. I mean, unfortunately, I lost my mum just before Christmas to cancer. So that you know that's still quite raw. But unfortunately, Nikki's dad passed away last week to cancer, and it brought it all back. Obviously, it's been incredibly difficult for Nikki, but it brought it all back about my mum. And then the day after, unfortunately, we heard about Jamie Roy's passing, which is a massive shock. And he's actually done a remix of Bells of New York. So we don't know what's happening with that, unfortunately. But he was such a lovely bloke. So that was a massive shock. And then the legend that is Stu Allen passed away. And I mean, three people that you like. Obviously, my father-in-law. He was, he was the only out of the three father-in-laws. He was the only one who treated me like a bloke. Actually spoke to me on a level. And he's helped us out, immensely in the last 13 years that I've known Nikki. But to lose three people in 1 week, it's been brutal.
It has been brutal. Well, I wanted to make sure that we give them a mention, and we don't forget them on this. I'll say thank you to you, my friend. I'll leave you to the rest of your Tuesday evening. I'll send a wave and a kiss in your wife's direction, and do come back and check out some of the comments. You've been getting a lot of love from people watching, my man.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Andy.
It has, my friend. It has. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone now. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Nice one. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Mark Archer, and it was interesting to hear his story. Quite touching at the end. The fact that we had to pay homage to people that he's lost. Stu Allen, someone actually, one of the few DJs in the scene that I never really got to know very well, but whenever you see someone that's so instrumental and influential pass away, it cannot go unnoticed. So I was happy that we could give him a shout out. So many of you have been liking the stream tonight. So many of you have been commenting. You'll have to forgive me if I didn't address you direct, but you can see on the screen here, Emily, Andy, Dave, Lynn, Danny, Malcolm, Stuart, Sharon. Those are just a few here that I can see on the list. A lot of those names won't have seen what I do before. The channel is called Inspire and Be Inspired. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/DJ Andy Ward. And over the course of the last 12 to 15 months, I've interviewed a lot of people that you would have heard about in that interview there, and many other people as well, documenting the Birmingham story, documenting Manchester, Nottingham, Leicester, Derby, Sheffield. Go back and check out some of the interviews. I think you'll find them interesting. Thank you for being here. On the screen in front of us, we can see a logo that's spinning. I have the biggest week of my year coming up. It kicks off on Friday, the Vocal Booth Weekender here in Spain where I live. Big love out to all the Vocal Booth family. And on the screen in the top left-hand corner, we have been seeing logos zooming in and out of the vision. Those are people who subscribe to me on a monthly basis, and if you're interested in that at all and getting your logo on the screen, then you can find out more about that at djandyward.net. Thank you for your time. I'll be taking a couple of weeks off once I get my little festival out of the way. And then when we come back, I'm going to be talking to some more legends in the game. I've got more big names out of Birmingham, some huge names out of London, and we'll be going transatlantic at some point. Thank you very much. You take care of yourselves now. Bye.